It's my honor and privilege to be here with you on Comments with Dr. James Haney. I've been on the show once or twice before, and I've lived long enough to be able to enjoy you for the better part of my life, which is a great thing. One of my professors in school, and just commend you for 3 decades of providing service to the community through this particular show. So through that same 3-decade period, I've had several manifestations of evolution in my life. I started out, grew up in metro schools in Nashville, Tennessee, and I graduated from metro schools just barely. I was one of those kids who had a lot of potential, but I didn't always have focus. So when I barely got out of school, barely got into college, I was able to get into Tennessee State and meet professors like you, W. Dewey Cox, H. Devereaux Brady, and people who inspired me. So I took on a career in communications and majored in that. Ended up being Student Government Association president and had a great run there with activism and learning to be socially conscious. That's where it was put in me at that age, to be socially conscious. So from there, I founded a newspaper called The Third Eye. And for 11 years, I ran The Third Eye, talked on national public radio. I had a great little crew of dreamers who said that they were going to do great things one day, including my older brother, Greg, who was at the time in law school. Friend of mine named Van Jones, who at the time was talking about going to law school and changing the world and being a commentator. And we look back years later, my brother's the chair of Afro-American Studies at Howard, and Van Jones is the co-host of CNN's Crossfire. So I think we came around a little group of people who did some pretty good things. I did that for 11 years and then transitioned into professional theater, ran a theater company called Amun-Ra, which presented works everywhere from the Smithsonian to the National Black Theater Festival. And in that course of 11 years, wrote about 11 plays, toured the country nationally, did a few films, and all the while wanted to do things that dealt with uplifting people spiritually. So I became a licensed and ordained minister, became initiated in African traditional systems, and found a way to want to pull those things together. So now, at this space where I am now, I am a founder and chief spiritual officer of a group called the Infinity Fellowship, which is an interfaith gathering in Nashville, Tennessee, where we focus on the common elements in different faith traditions that spur people towards activism and healing issues of social justice.
And you're also involved with, as the title today indicates, housing for the homeless. And
yes, sir.
Why don't you, over the next couple of minutes, give us some information in reference to how you became involved in housing for the homeless and something about some of your experiences dealing with the homeless population. And I won't have you to talk about the time you spent sitting on top of a school in reference, but you go on.
Yeah, it seems that I'm drawn to these extreme experiences. I don't know what that is, but when I was in college, we took over the administration building at TSU, and that was the sit-in of 1990. It was became a well-known movement where we shut down the administration building, we took over, had people on the roof, and it resulted after 14 days of that and a hunger strike that was 9 days inside that, $120 million being spent on Tennessee State. So if you see the campus improvements out there, that's not how it looked when I was in school. But we very much had a movement that did that. You fast forward that to sitting on a roof for 9 days to raise money and awareness for a theater program that I was doing for young people in the inner city at Amun-Ra, where we raised almost $40,000 for scholarships for young people. I pitched a tent and lived on the roof there. So we fast forward that to last year, or this past summer actually, when I lived in a micro home, which is a 60 square foot full house, but 60 square feet, which means, 6 by 10 on an auto trailer that's been refurbished. And I lived in that for 45 days to raise the money that we needed to build what's now known as Infinity Village.
Okay, and what we're going to do, Reverend Carr, is to take this commercial break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the housing for the homeless, as the topic indicates today. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. the second segment.
Okay.
I would imagine these are the images that.
We'll come out to you guys on camera like normal, and then we'll pop up the images once you get into it.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, and that'll give us an opportunity to start, off on the homeless.
Okay.
Give us some of your experiences with the homeless. I know you used to walk around the city and find folks. Give us a taste of some of the folks that you need. Find that there's a need and whatever, and then they can start popping those up, and you can show how you're trying to meet these needs. And
Yes, sir.
we can do 8 minutes of that,
Okay.
and then we'll come back with this 10 minutes and talk about other things.
That'll
Okay?
work. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is excellent. This is excellent and so we're going to be able. We can start off, and I can welcome them back, and et cetera. And then at some point, you're going to, and I'll just mention, the fact that you want me to direct him to those.
If you want to, or we can give it about 20, 30 seconds and just take it.
Okay, well that sounds. Why don't you take it?
Give it about 20, 30 on camera and take it.
Okay.
A little under a minute.
So when you hit me the questions, when I see them pop up, I'll just defer to what the things I see, and I'll narrate according to I'll
what you
lead
see.
it in that direction.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is housing for the homeless, and we're fortunate to have with us Reverend JCarr4 from Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, who has given us some information in reference to his background, education, and experiences. And so what we'd like to do now is to talk about housing for the homeless. Talk about some of your experiences in reference to the homeless population.
Indeed, Doc. Well, Infinity Fellowship is a body that's dedicated toward taking what we share in common and taking social action with it. And one of the things that we want to provide is something that Sister Vicolin Abdullah, a friend of mine who's a member, says is homefulness. So you don't just say something is wrong with the world. You find a way to fix what's wrong with the world, and you do it affirmatively. So Dwayne Jones, who's a buddy of mine from Memphis, Tennessee, and I had traveled to Haiti to do work there. We built some housing there. We built some tent cities there. And Dwayne had this idea to build these micro homes. And I said, well, we want to be involved with that. Infinity is very much about the youth and the young people and providing new kind of opportunities for people to evolve spiritually. One of those ways is by going out into the community and doing community-based initiatives where people who may not have the safety of a home that we have here. So I pitched the idea to fundraisers and people. We said, well, let's do something interesting. Let's find Nashville's tent city and find a way to provide them with some permanent houses. So we started that campaign, and that's what ended up resulting in Infinity Village. I lived in a space. It's a picture from one of the spaces that I lived in there. I lived in a space for 45 days. And then we raised over $60,000, and Dwayne and I, who you see there in the picture, we put the village together. That's the first completed Infinity Village that replaced the tent city that was dispersed in Nashville during the flood. And we worked together to put these houses in place, and now everyone who lives in the house has an insulated building. They have electricity wired for the houses. They have laminate floors. They have a drop-down Murphy bed. And it's so much better than sleeping on the ground in a tent, especially with the weather as it's been lately. So we want to continue to find a way to provide innovative solutions to social problems. And we prove with this project that it doesn't take a lot of bureaucracy. It doesn't take a lot of red tape. All it takes is a few people deciding that we want to take action, identifying what the need is, and then putting our hands in place with people who are of a unitary mind and making things happen. We did the entire project for Infinity Village in about 7 weeks. From the time I moved into the micro home to the time that I moved out. It took us 10 days to build 6 homes, And we worked pretty much around the clock during those 10 days, and we put them in place in August of 2015. And since then, it sparked a national trend for people around the country who now want to do something similar, to not provide a permanent solution to homelessness, but to provide at least a temporary step up for people where they can have transitional housing and move from living in a car or a tent or a crawl space into living in a solid home where they can have an address and they can get a job, to moving back into affordable housing and back to the workplace. We'd be surprised that in Nashville, between 2,000 and 4,000 people a night are classified as homeless. And when I was living in the micro home, I found that I was doing what a normal homeless person would do. My wonderful wife, Kanitha, was, taking care of, we've got 5 kids, and she, through that project, made sure that they were taken care of. But I was showering at the gym, getting my shave in, sometimes in a bathroom when I needed to. And I met people who are going to work every day in corporate America, wearing suits, doing what they need to do, who were showering at the gym, eating lunch at work, and then going home at night and sleeping in their car. And people didn't even know it. And so they would come to me and say, thank you for doing something about this, because you'd be surprised the number of people in Nashville that look really good but are struggling.
How much does it cost to construct one of these houses?
Raw materials, you can construct one between $4,000 and $6,000. We used about $7,000 per house because we hired a professional crew. If you can do it yourself and you are a construction person and you're licensed and you know how to put these houses together, you can do it a little cheaper than that. Some people call for volunteers to do it now. We didn't want to use volunteers in this particular manifestation because we wanted to make sure that we could stand behind the construction on every house. And sometimes when you have volunteers do mean well, but they might, cut short on a measurement and, not think that when the wind blows, that little half-inch gap is going to make a difference between where the house is standing or falling.
But what you're saying here is that you found a way that you can economically supply a need that is that's much greater in a real sense than somebody being able to live on the streets.
Yes, indeed.
That brings a lot of dignity.
Yes.
In a real sense, back to individuals who find that they have their own individual space and life and secure in a real sense. Is that what you find in reference to?
It is. It's an issue of human dignity, Doc. And when you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about your hopes, your dreams, your family's future, you're thinking about your career and the things that motivate you, that's a lot. It's already a lot. And when you're gifted with being able to lay your head down at night in a solid place that's going to be consistent, that helps you to live those. But when you're not, the first thing that you're thinking about when you get up in the morning is, where am I going to sleep tonight?
Tonight, that's exactly.
How am I going to eat? How am I going to navigate my dreams in a world where being homeless, being out of doors, being poor is criminalized? Then that's a whole lot to put on somebody's plate. But when you provide them with housing, we see that every research study, including the one that Vanderbilt did last summer, has concluded the same thing, that the #1 way that you deal with the issue of homelessness, whether that's regular people, or whether that's people in the lower economic strata, or whether it's veterans, is to provide housing. I mean, it's simple, right? We spent $500,000 to find out that the way you stop homelessness is with a home. But it's true.
That's so extraordinary, too, in reference to how easy it is. Well, not easy to concept and et cetera, but after the concept has been laid out and has been proven that this is a successful way of doing it, then it seems so very, very simple.
It's simple, and of course, there are details. It's not easy to build a house. It's easy for people who know how to build a house.
That's it.
So you get the people, you partner with people, but with Infinity, the concept that we've been talking about is everybody contributing something. So there were people who wrote a check for $5,000, and they said, I'm basically going to cover a house. There were homeless people from Mexico who put a check on for $5 and said, I want to live in the U.S. one day. I appreciate what you're doing. What we saw in living motion was the African proverb, when spider webs unite, they can restrain a lion.
Very good. And of course, we're going to take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience.